Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, I don't know what's going on these past few videos, but for some reason my views are a little bit down. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, but if you could, make sure to like the video. If you find yourself watching my channel often, but for whatever reason you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button below. What I'm going to do is if this video can get 2,000 views and 200 likes, I am going to go ahead and upload a video every single day next week. So make sure to hit the like button if you like my content. If I get 200 likes and 2,000 views on this video, I will upload a video every single day next week. So that's more fantasy football content for you guys. All right, I'm going to give you guys a list here of players. I have 7 players here that I consider to just be absolutely bust-proof for the 2023 fantasy football season. So I'm going to give you this list, but for the sake of today's video, I'm not going to include Chris Olave because I feel like I've talked about him like every video this offseason, so I don't want to talk to you about Chris Olave in every single video I post. So he's not going to be on this list, but I do have him as a bust-proof player. Also, I'm not going to be including quarterbacks because they touch the ball on every snap, and any mainstream quarterback, as we know, is pretty close to being bust-proof. Guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, we know those guys are going to go off, right? So I'm including position players that aren't quarterbacks. First player on my list is going to be Bijan Robinson. Now, this is a guy who, you look at his college workload, and it went up significantly every single season. He had 250-plus carries in his final season in college, over 1,580 rushing yards, over 6 yards per carry. This dude was absolutely dominant. And obviously, the draft capital is there. He was taken 8th overall in an age where running backs don't get drafted highly in NFL drafts anymore. So we know that this team is going to be built around Bijan Robinson. They were the second most rushing attempt team in the NFL last year. As far as rushing attempts, they had the second most rushing attempts of any team in the NFL. So considering the fact that they were already heading in that direction and now they drafted Bijan, they're clearly planning on building this team around the run. So draft Bijan Robinson. This dude's going to be the ultimate workhorse. And of any running back going in the first round, he's by far and away the safest, most bust-proof player because there's obvious risk tied to Christian McCaffrey because he's getting a little bit older. He's got some injury history. We're unsure of the quarterback situation. There's a lot of what-ifs with Christian McCaffrey. And then obviously Austin Eckler has a lot of what-ifs as well. Will the target share be there with all the other wide receivers? He's not really a guy that ever rushes for over, 1,100 yards. There's obvious question marks with Austin Eckler as well. So Bijan Robinson is the safest running back going off the board in the first round. He's one of my most bust-proof players of the entire season. Next player on my list is going to be Jamar Chase. Now, this is a guy who, first of all, I want to point out that if you're optimizing for best ball, obviously the Chiefs and the Bengals are playing Week 17. This is going to be an awesome player to stack with other players on the Chiefs and Bengals for that final Week 17 game if you're optimizing for best ball. And just for really any league format, this dude is an absolute goldmine. I mean, last year, despite missing 5 games, was 3rd in the league in red zone targets with 26 red zone targets. This dude certainly has a chance to be the wide receiver 1. And, everybody knows how high I am on Cooper Kupp. I have him projected as my wide receiver 1 because I'm just so big on the Cooper Kupp ceiling because what we've seen in his last year and a half of dominance and, just literally just absolutely exploding and putting up some of the most insane fantasy numbers I've ever seen. But there's obvious risks with Cooper Kupp, injuries with himself, his quarterback's a little bit older. Jamar Chase to me is safer than Cooper Kupp, so I have him as more of a bust-proof player, although I do have Cooper Kupp ranked ahead of him because I think he has still a higher ceiling than anyone in fantasy by far. But Jamar Chase is bust-proof. He's got a great young quarterback. He's in what could be a top 5 overall offense in the NFL. He's peppered with targets within the red zone. Last year, he had a 36+% air yard share in his offense. This dude has everything going for him. The target share was there too, 29.3% target share, 6th in the NFL. This dude is absolute money. Draft Jamar Chase. He's bust-proof. Next player on my list is going to be Stefan Diggs. Now, this is a player who, if you look at all 3 of his seasons in Buffalo, this guy has been top 5 in the league in targets. His first season in Buffalo, 166 targets, 1st in the NFL. 2021, 164 targets, 5th in the NFL. Last season, 155 targets, 5th in the NFL. So this dude has been top 5 in the NFL every single season in overall targets since he's been in Buffalo. And the efficiency last year was crazy, 2.87 yards per route run at the wide receiver position, which was 3rd overall. And we know how good this guy is. We've watched him play for years. This is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL with one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL and Josh Allen to sling him the rock. They drop back and throw deep balls more than any team in the NFL. The deep ball attempts are going to be there. The touchdown upside is there. Stefan Diggs is going to be bust-proof. Now, we obviously have to keep in mind they have been talking about potentially going over and, signing, DeAndre Hopkins, right? So if they sign DeAndre Hopkins, that's going to change this entirely. And he will plummet in my rankings if they sign DeAndre Hopkins. But as of right now, with the way the roster is constructed, even with a little bit of drama going on in Buffalo, that'll work itself out by the time the season starts. Stefan Diggs, as of right now, the way the roster is looking, is a bust-proof player. Next player on my list is going to be Garrett Wilson. Now, this is a guy who we saw put up awesome numbers last year with terrible quarterbacks. He had some of the worst quarterbacks in the league throwing him the ball. Now he's going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the league throwing him the ball. Last year, he saw 147 targets, which was top 6 in the NFL, and had over 1,100 receiving yards as a rookie. It's not often that rookies come out and put up these kinds of seasons. We've seen it, with, Chris Olave, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson in recent years. There's receivers that are coming out and being good in year one, but those receivers that go off in year one, what happens in year two? They still take a massive leap. We saw it with Jamar Chase. We saw it with we saw it with Justin Jefferson. We're about to see it with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And I'm very certain that Garrett Wilson should just be a first-round pick. I mean, he's got one of the better quarterbacks in the league slinging him the rock. We know he's about to make that sophomore leap and get a ton of fantasy points. He is by far and away the number one wide receiver in an offense that's going to be very, very good. This guy, if he stays healthy and Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and they don't require any sort of wide receivers that are going to cut into his target share, he is absolutely bust-proof. Next player on my list is going to be Amari Cooper. Now, I've been huge on Amari Cooper this entire offseason. He's one of my most owned players on Underdog Fantasy right now. And 6 out of his 8 seasons in the NFL, this dude has had over 1,000 receiving yards, right? So this is a guy who, you look at him and he sorry, guys, I have to get something real quick. You look at him and he's pretty much just a player that is underrated every single season in fantasy. And, you look at his numbers last year, he had 1,765 air yards, which was 5th in the NFL. He had 9 touchdowns at the wide receiver position, which was 4th in the NFL. He put up these kind of numbers with a bunch of nobodies throwing on the ball. Now you insert Deshaun Watson. Guys, I will remind you that Deshaun Watson was a top 5 fantasy points per game quarterback every single full season that he played in Houston. And all 3 of his full seasons in Houston, he was never outside of the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks in fantasy points per game at the quarterback position. And yet everyone's sleeping on him, and he's going as like the quarterback 10 right now. This is absolutely mind-blowing to me. I don't understand how people don't see Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper coming. They're my biggest, most owned stack on Underdog Fantasy because they have the same kind of upside as the stacks that you have to pay a lot more to get. And you can get Amari Cooper in round 4 and Deshaun Watson in round 7. So this stack with Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper is absolutely insane. Amari Cooper is about to absolutely explode. Last year, you look at the touchdowns, right? He had 9 touchdowns, 4th in the NFL at the wide receiver position, right? And this was not fluky because it came on 16 red zone targets. So, it's not like that fluky Deebo Samuel season where he had a bunch of touchdowns, but they all came on rushing touchdowns or big plays. No, this guy was getting peppered with targets within the red zone as he normally is because of his awesome route running and contested catch abilities. I love Amari Cooper going forward. And, this season, I still think he's young enough to have another good season or 2 in him. So, 3 seasons in a row of finishing top 10 or top 15 as far as red zone targets. He's getting all the high value touches. I love Amari Cooper going forward. I think he's absolutely bust proof as long as he and Deshaun Watson both stay healthy. Next player on my list is going to be Chris Godwin. Now, Chris Godwin, 27 years old, which is obviously a huge factor here because his main target share competition, Mike Evans, is getting a little bit older now. So you got to figure that the overall target share percentage is going to sway significantly in Chris Godwin's favor this season because of the age and the fact that he's still in his prime, whereas Mike Evans is kind of exiting his prime. And on top of that, it's probably going to be either Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask slinging the rock. So are they going to target their slot wide receivers more with less confidence in their quarterback? Probably so, right? So you got to figure that they're going to be leaning on Chris Godwin to eat out of the slot because they really aren't necessarily going to trust their quarterbacks to just sling the ball down the field all the time. Now, this is a wide receiver who can thrive on the deep ball as well, but, he's still going to get at least a fair share of deep targets. But the main thing that makes Chris Godwin eat is his dominance in his short intermediate routes, and his run after the catch abilities, and his overall target share volume. So all of that should still be there for Chris Godwin, regardless of who the quarterback is. So no matter who plays quarterback for Tampa this year, I think Chris Godwin's massively slept on, and I think he's absolutely bust-proof. Next and final player on my list is going to be Calvin Ridley. Now, this is a guy who you look at his last full season in the NFL, 2,063 air yards, which was first in the NFL, 40 deep targets, first in the NFL, 1,300 receiving yards, 22 red zone targets, 2.48 yards per route run. This guy was absolutely dominant in every way, shape, and form in his last season. And there's probably people in fantasy that think that he might have some bust ability because Well, he hasn't played a full season in 2 years. But guys, this is an experienced NFL wide receiver. He's got an entire offseason to mesh with Trevor Lawrence. And, if this guy can be successful with a late career Matt Ryan slinging him the rock and put up those kind of fantasy numbers, imagine how good he could be with a third-year Trevor Lawrence who's going to take a massive leap this year and has been clearly getting better and better every single year that he's been in the NFL. Going into year 3, this dude's going to be better than he's ever been. He's going to be by far and away the best quarterback that Calvin Ridley has ever had throwing on the ball. So even though there's some target share competition, I just don't take it seriously. Christian Kirk is not real target share competition for Calvin Ridley. I think that Calvin Ridley is going to be an absolute target hog in this offense. This could easily be a top 5 overall offense in the NFL. Look for this dude to explode. As long as he is on the field, he is bust-proof. All right, guys, those are my bust-proof players for the season. There's obviously players I have on here that I might have ranked higher overall than players that I have on this list, but that's because of their ceiling, but they still might have some bustability. But the players that I just gave you, if you want that sure thing, if you want that safe bet, that player that absolutely will go off, it's these guys. So make sure to draft them in fantasy. All right, guys, I do appreciate you tuning into the video. Catch you later.